Hello and welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 1 of Three Things with JR. Episode number 41, technically, right? But I think we're going to call it Episode 1 of Season 2. I still haven't figured out how I'm going to actually, name it in the Anchor app when I upload it all. We'll see what looks good as far as a title. I'm going to try to stay and keep it consistent. In Season 1, it was always first thing, second thing, 23rd thing, 39th thing, right? I'm not sure I'm going to keep going with that naming sort of, there's a word for that. I can't think of it. That naming thing. I'm not going to keep naming it that way. So I may come up with a new way of titling each episode, but I am going to try to still find funny stuff I said in the episode as the title. That'll still be a thing. Also, we've got new theme music. So last season, we were using Picture This, a song from the first album by the band Big. This season, we're going to use a new song. We've talked about it on previous episodes, but this is the final recorded version. Just the beginning of the song will be the new theme song for Three Things with JR Season 2. The song is called Brand New Day, and that is how we are going to kick off each episode for this season. And I told you in the last episode of Season 1 that Season 2 was going to kick off just 1 week later, no delay, and then last week came and went, and there was no new episode. So I know there's a lot of you out there just wondering what happened to the beginning of Season 2, and I'll tell you what happened. I went on another road trip last week. It was not a planned road trip. When I recorded episode 40 and told you that, I had no idea I was going to be getting in my car and driving to Iowa again. But that's what happened. New Year's Day, I hopped into my brand new Subaru Crosstrek, brand new. It's 6 months old now, but it's still brand new to me. And I drove to Iowa. I left at around 10 o'clock-ish and maybe 9 o'clock-ish on Friday morning, New Year's Day. And I drove straight through to Emmetsburg, Iowa. It was a great trip. I did not get any tickets this time. The drive was going great. I was keeping it right at about 5 miles an hour over the speed limit anywhere I was, all the way until I got to western Indiana and pretty much all of Illinois. Had to slow down and go more like 55 because of the snow. It was snowing. It wasn't like blizzard or whiteout conditions, but the snow was coming down good enough that it was sticking to the road, and it was kind of slushy, and it was not easy to pass people, so I didn't. I just stayed in the right lane, which was where most of the cars were driving, most of the trucks were, and just kept it there behind a car, and we were just doing 55, and it was kind of white-knuckle-ish there for a little while, because if you kind of got off to the left or the right, you were going to get your tires into 2 or 3 inches of slushy shit that was going to cause a problem. And I know it would have caused a problem if I had let my car veer off too far from the clear pavement, because there were no less than 30 cars off the road, some of them upside down, in the median, in the ditches, up against the guardrails, abandoned, probably to be picked up within the next day or so by a tow truck or something. But clearly, people were not giving this storm the respect it deserved, and they did not do well. They ended up off the side of the road. I saw 2 tractor trailers, one of them jackknifed over on the right side of the highway, another one literally on its side in the median somewhere in Illinois. So having to drive through Illinois at 55 miles an hour instead of 75 miles an hour was Illinoising, let me just say. Why was I going to Iowa? Well, as you probably know, if you've listened to this show or if you just know me or my family, that's where my dad lives. It's where he grew up. and it's where he caught COVID back in November, right before Thanksgiving. And I went out there with my sister to help him out. Then there wasn't much we could do because he was in the hospital and near death. In fact, that's the only reason we got in to see him when we were there. So we got to see him once, and then we hung out, tried to make sure all of his affairs were in order. It became clear that he was getting better, but that he wasn't going to be out of the hospital anytime soon, so there was no real reason for us to stick around, so we came home. Now, Dad is doing a whole lot better. He spent a little over a month in 2 different hospitals, finally left and went to stay with his twin sister, Elaine, and was there for a week or 2, doing okay, but not doing great. Basically just good enough to not be in the hospital. And he was getting kind of depressed. He wasn't eating much, sleeping all the time, just no personality. It was like Dad just wasn't quite there yet. He wasn't quite back. And it struck me that it was important that I go back out there and take Dad, bring him back to his apartment, let him sort of get acclimated to real life out of the hospital. The part of what was making him kind of go a little nutty was being in the hospital for so long, being on the drugs that helped him recover from COVID, steroids and things like that, and just having COVID. And the long-term effects of COVID kind of suck. If you're kind of older and if you have some pre-existing conditions and you are if you get a bad case of the COVID, it's going to be with you for a while. And it seems like it's going to be with Dad for a while. I'm happy to report, though, that in the just over a week time that I was there with Dad, hanging with Dad, going out to shopping with Dad, making food, eating, watching TV, Dad kind of came to life. Welcome back, Dad. He's now got someone at his morning coffee described it as, hey, that twinkle in your eye is back. The color in his skin is back. He's got more energy. Still, the long-term effects of all of that are still messing with his brain a little bit, and he's not quite as hungry as he normally is. Nothing tastes good. It's not that he can't taste anything now. It's just that all of it tastes bad, apparently. Even water. Water tastes bad. Who knew? So these are some of the long-term effects of COVID, and Dad's still dealing with them. But before I left and came back home, we got Dad a good support system. People are stopping over to see him, bringing him groceries, taking him out to the store, taking him to coffee, to his doctor's appointments, things like that. And with the support system in place, I felt it was okay to leave and come on home and try to get back to my life. And so that's where I was last week. With all of that happening in Emmetsburg, there just wasn't enough time or brain power for me to record an episode of the podcast. So there you go, an update on Dad and why I didn't record the podcast. One nice thing about how this has all transpired is, for the last couple years, Dad and I have had some fairly heated arguments about politics, Trump, the right, the left, Black Lives Matter, all of that kind of stuff. And ever since he's gotten sick, we have not had any discussions about any of that stuff, at all. And it's really just been so nice, because talking about that stuff with Dad is not always pleasant or fun. I don't think for either of us, because we both know we're not going to change the other's mind, and we are both pretty confident we're on the right side of things. However, we just didn't have that to worry about. We just talked about other stuff. Even on Wednesday last week, when the Trump supporters were rioting and invading the Capitol building, we didn't really get into it. Dad did say things like Donald Trump should be ashamed of himself. He should stop this. He could tweet one thing and this would all go away. These people are ridiculous. He was clearly disgusted with the actions of a bunch of those people that day. It was kind of crazy, and it was nice to see that Dad recognized that was awful. So there's that. And I don't know. It's kind of nice not talking politics with Dad for the most part. So there you go. An update on Dad. Back to doing the podcast. I am excited to be talking to you. I've got 3 things to tell you about. Thing number 1 is the small town of Emmetsburg. That's where Dad grew up. I've heard thousands of stories about the town of Emmetsburg. I've been there many times. I've been going there since I was a kid. My mother, I was conceived there in Emmetsburg, in all likelihood, from what I understand. So I have a long history of going with Dad and our family to visit the small town of Emmetsburg where he grew up, where his family still lives, and I've always enjoyed it. It's a small town in the Midwest, surrounded by cornfields and a lake, the Five Island Lake. I've done a podcast from the lake when I was there back in November. Go back and listen to it if you want to hear what the lake sounds like, I guess. But it's the epitome of small towns. Everybody knows each other. There's only around 4,000 people in Emmetsburg proper. That includes all the farmers and stuff around town. It's got a great little main street. There are 2 traffic lights in the entire town of Emmetsburg, and it's got coffee shops and restaurants. It used to have more stores that you used to be able to get everything you needed, basic necessities, and including things like clothes and stuff like that. There was a J.C. Penney's there apparently at one point. But none of that stuff really exists anymore. Most of the downtown and the main street are bars or restaurants or lawyers' offices or abstract companies. Several companies that just say Emmetsburg Abstract Company or Iowa Abstract. I have no idea what that is. It's something that, it sounds interesting until you realize it's just like an accountant or something, or a real estate or thing. So there's something like that. Something super boring is what an abstract company is. But anyway, I've always loved downtown Emmetsburg. It's just, I used to ride my bike there when I was a kid from my grandma Susie's house, Dad's mom, and riding across the train tracks, going down to swim in the pool, playing on the playground, and it's just beautiful. It was awesome. And I still like it. I still dig it. Dad lives in an apartment literally right on Main Street. You can see the entire Court Square, and there's constantly trucks going by with pigs or corn or whatever's in those trucks. And it's at this time of year, it's kind of gross and dirty and snowy, and it's not quite as beautiful as you might think, but it is lovely to me. I just enjoy hanging out. And you might think nothing crazy happens in a small town in Iowa, especially in the winter. However, you'd be wrong. My Aunt Patty, my Aunt Elaine, Dad's sisters still live there as well. Aunt Patty lives in a assisted living facility. It's basically a big apartment building where there's people around that could help you if you need it. And so she has a small 1-bedroom apartment in this building. And she was telling me the other day that she had a visitor, a late night visitor. A gentleman that lives in the building with her there stopped into her apartment, opened her front door, which she didn't keep locked, came into the kitchen, was in the kitchen for a few minutes, and then came into her bedroom and introduced himself, asked her if she was asleep, and she said, "I was asleep, and you need to get the hell out of here," because he was naked. He totally disrobed in her kitchen and just entered the bedroom in the middle of the night, and she wasn't having any part of it. She told him to get lost. He finally did. He put his clothes back on and left. And we found out that he had done the same thing to somebody else in the same building, and that there was in process was getting a restraining order, getting this guy out of there. He wasn't going to be long for living in that particular building. Which that seems crazy, right? That's not what I was expecting to hear. I mean, I know that, romance happens in nursing homes, assisted living facilities, but this was something else, not romance. This was potentially a criminal act, maybe. Some other crazy stuff that happens. Dad and I were getting ready to leave his apartment to go to the hospital, to go to an appointment, and a gentleman opens his front door, sees that we're there, and then closes the door. We were on our way out anyway, so I opened the door and I said, "Hello, can I help you?" And he said, "Yeah, hey, I'm looking to move back to Emmetsburg. I grew up here and then I moved away and I've traveled the world, been gone for 50 years or so, but now I'm going to settle back in here to Emmetsburg. And I wanted to move into one of these apartments in this building, and I was hoping to see somebody that lives here, lives in an apartment, find out how you like it, see what the apartments are like. And so we had a nice chat. I let him know that Dad's very happy living here. It's a nice place, et cetera, et cetera. And so he's like, he wanted to talk to the landlord, but she was unavailable that day, so he was just talking to whoever he could find, which was seemingly great, no problem. Until it happened again that same afternoon. Same guy opens the door to Dad's apartment without knocking, sees that we're there, closes the door, and starts walking down the hall. So I approached him again and said, "Hey, can I help you? What's going on?" And he kind of tells me the same story he told me earlier. And I was like, "Hey, man, no problem. You do need to knock on doors before you open them." He said, "Oh, I can't because the apartment I want to see is locked." I was like, "I know, but you just opened the door to my dad's apartment twice today without even knocking, and that's not okay." He apologized and kept on going. So I thought this was weird enough that I went ahead and texted the landlord, who I now know after visiting out there a couple times, and she was very kind. She said, "Yep, I know him. He actually has dementia, maybe some Alzheimer's. He wants to move in here. I don't think he's going to be able to because he has a dog, and there's no dogs in the apartments here. So thanks for letting me know." No problem. Thought it was done. I see this guy walking around town as I'm outside smoking cigarettes or getting a coffee at the coffee shop. I see this guy just walking around. He's an older guy, very old. I'm guessing 85 maybe. And he seems to be in good shape. He's got lots of energy and a nice enough guy mostly, except for the fact that he likes to just open doors and come on in. But I've seen him around. And then the next morning, I saw him while I was outside. I saw him walking by and just walk on into the apartment building again. So I followed him, and he didn't just open doors. He did just kind of walk around. So I said, "Hey, man, how's it going?" He's like, "Oh, good." And then he proceeds to try to tell me the same story again. And I was like, yep, I heard all that yesterday. I went ahead and also texted the landlord to say, "Hey, he's in the building right now. And you might just wanted you to know." And she wasn't available to do anything about it. She called me later and said he had stopped by her office that day and told her he wanted to rent an apartment there. And she unfortunately had to explain to him that that was not going to happen. He can't walk around the building knocking or opening unlocked doors. He can't be there because of a dog. He's going to be trespassing if he's continuing to come into her apartment building where he is not allowed and will not be rented an apartment. And he said, "Okay, fine. Well, fuck you, bitch." And he left. Wow. Not expecting any of that. You know what the craziest part is? He's the same guy that was naked in Aunt Patty's room. That's the same guy. So he definitely needs a new place to live, and it's definitely not going to be in my dad's apartment building. And my Auntie Lane, she already was, but she is doubly checking to make sure her door is locked on her apartment in a whole different building, also in Emmetsburg, just so we don't get the trifecta of this gentleman walking into all three of the Stoffel siblings that still live in Emmetsburg. We need to stop it at 2. 2 is enough. So there you go. So crazy stuff happening in Emmetsburg, and everybody involved, by the way, we get it. Dementia, Alzheimer's. This guy was not actively, doing bad things. We think he was confused. He's got an issue where he's probably going to need some extra help. He does have family in town. We are hoping that they are able to place him in a facility where they can get him the help that he needs so that he can stay safe and not get shot because he's just opening people's doors and taking his clothes off in their apartments. Anyway, the best to him, the best to everybody in Emmetsburg. I had a wonderful time there, and I'm happy to be home and talking to you on 3 Things with JR. That was thing 1. We'll be back in a minute with things 2 and 3, but first, here's a drum solo. All right, we are back. 3 Things with JR, episode number 41, season 2, episode 1. Thank you for sticking around. I would like to tell you about thing number 2 right now. And after a road trip, it's pretty hard not to tell you about what I listen to on the road trip, because that's probably what has my attention these days. And this is not too dissimilar from what I listened to on the last time I drove to and from Iowa, but it's audiobooks. I'm into it. I never thought I liked audiobooks. I thought the purpose of a book was to read it with your eyes on a piece of paper. Years ago, I got over the paper part, and I've been reading books on my phone or my iPad for years now. Super convenient, but I thought that's the way to do it. To actually look at words, print it in front of you, and I didn't think it made sense to listen to a book, right? There's things made for consumption by audio, right? I don't know if that makes sense, is that grammatical, but anyway, there's things made for you to listen to. There's podcasts, music, talk shows, radio, all that stuff. Books are made to be read, or so I thought. Listening to a book can be wonderful. I now am a Audible subscriber. This is not a paid endorsement for Audible at all. This is simply me telling you what I'm enjoying listening to. And thanks to Audible, I am listening to audiobooks. The first one I've listened to was a Frederick Douglass biography. I've got George Washington, Washington, A Life by Ron Chernow. And I recently devoured the entire 900 pages of Barack Obama's new book on several long road trips. It was excellent. I have also completed John Grisham's new book, A Time for Mercy. Fantastic. I am reading reading again, I guess you could say, or listening to for the first time, but there's a series of books that I've talked about here before about a character named Jack Reacher. Books are written by Lee Child. I love Jack Reacher as a character. I love these books. I've never listened to one, though, and so that's what I'm listening to now. Is the first Jack Reacher book is called Killing Floor, and I am listening to that on Audible now, and it is just fantastic. It adds sort of a gravitas to it. They've always got the right person reading the books, and it sounds great. It gives it the right sort of. They're really good at picking the right person to read to bring the characters to life. Excuse me. In fact, one thing I didn't know about an audiobook was, how does the person reading the book deal with the different characters and their voices, right? Do they have multiple people ready to go as if you were reading a play or something, so that when a female character speaks, there's a female actress or person reading the lines that were written in the book? Or does just one person read the entire book? Do they just read it without trying to do voices when a character is speaking in the book? Or do they do voices? And it turns out, for at least 2 books now that I'm reading, the guy, in both cases this time, reading the book does do voices. And I got to tell you, the guy reading the John Grisham book, he was great. He had clearly practiced and had a specific voice and way of talking for each of the characters in the book, all the guys and all the females. And it turns out that's what you do, I guess, is when you have a female character in the book talking and you're a guy reading an audiobook, you just put on your best impression of a female, and they kind of all end up sounding the same. Guys doing female voices, all the females sound the same when you do that. Anyway, I just found that interesting. I didn't know how they did that, but it actually works well. And if the person reading the book has a plan and has a different voice for each of the main characters, it works out great, and it does add to the experience. But I was curious how that worked. The other cool thing about Audible, and something I recommend anybody out there interested in music listens to, is called Tom Morello, Speaking Truth to Power. It is an Audible exclusive. It's not an audio book. It's Tom Morello performing on stage at a theater in New York in October of 2019, so pre-COVID. He is basically telling his life story from being a kid all the way to being where he is now. And he intersperses it with music that he and his band are playing. And it is fantastic. I've actually listened to it 2 times now, and it has brought me to tears both times. And I highly recommend it. If you are familiar with the band Rage Against the Machine, he was the lead guitar player and the guy basically responsible for the voice and the direction of that band, along with the rest of them. But he's very much into activism and speaking truth to power and being a musical badass. So I highly recommend that. Tom Morello, Audible exclusive, the new Jack Reacher book, the new John Grisham book, Barack Obama's book, and any other book you want to read, yeah, go ahead and listen to it. You have my permission. It's okay to do that. In case you were thinking that was wrong like I used to, it's not. It's pretty freaking cool. Thing number 3. One last story about Emmetsburg. This will be a short one. I was outside smoking right there on Main Street. Can't smoke inside Dad's apartment or his apartment building, like most places these days. So I was standing out front smoking. And on 2 different evenings, I got yelled at by people in cars driving by. And the first one was actually people I knew. It were my cousins. I could tell. I recognized the vehicle after they drove by. I couldn't quite make out what they said, but I got yelled at on the side of the street just from people I knew, which was fine. That was kind of fun. And the next night was less fun. I was standing outside, again, smoking a cigarette, leaning against the building, looking at my phone, and this big Chevy pickup truck with a loud exhaust system and a cool paint job, there's a lot of those out there, drives by. Somebody on the passenger side, windows down, looks at me, and I didn't see them coming. I wasn't paying attention to them at all. He just looks out and yells, "Fuck you!" and continues on down the road. So I'm not sure if they were trying to get a reaction out of me or if they thought I was going to do something or if they were just drunk and just having fun or if they were actually upset with me for something. I can't imagine what that would have been. Maybe they're just so anti-smoking that that's what they were mad about. They saw me outside smoking, like, that guy, we need to tell him that is not cool. How do we do it? I know. Let's drive by and yell, "Fuck you." And that'll do it. And yeah, it didn't work, guys. I am still addicted to cigarettes. And it's probably time to end the podcast because the dogs are barking. And if you're wondering who's going to let them out, it's me. It's me and Scherzer and Rocket here this evening. Kiki is out to dinner with a friend, and we are podcasting it up while she's gone. Thank you so much for coming back and listening and sticking with 3 Things with JR. I will be back next week. God, I hope so. I hope I'm not in Iowa again next week. As much as I love Dad, I don't want to do another road trip to Iowa anytime real soon. So if all goes according to plan, I'll be back next week with another set of 3 Things with JR. Thanks for listening. I love you all. Here's a drum solo.